Serene Arbitration had resolved 847 interspecies conflicts without firing a single shot. Its crew took pride in being the hegemony's most boring ship, a distinction that required considerable talent when your job involved preventing civilizations from obliterating each other over parking disputes that had escalated to planetary bombardment. Captain Vexai reviewed the mission briefing with the enthusiasm of someone scheduling root canal surgery. "Another reality manipulation claim," they announced to the bridge, their mandibles clicking in what passed for a sigh among the Kethmori. Apparently this species has achieved localized physics violations through something called prayer. Commander Zoltar, whose people had evolved from particularly paranoid fungi, sprouted skeptical spores. The survey team's preliminary report mentions divine intervention occurring at statistically impossible rates. Water becoming wine, seas parting, dead returning to life. "Probably stage demonstrations," suggested Navigator Pinway, adjusting her species' trademark crystalline eye clusters. "The Torellians pulled similar tricks with holograms before we caught them strip mining their neighbors' asteroid belts." Cultural analyst Mordoon, a slug-like being whose species processed information by literally absorbing written materials, had consumed Earth's entire religious database during the approach. He now glistened with what his people called intellectual indigestion. "This is different," Mordoon gurgled, secreting anxiety pheromones. "These aren't technological demonstrations. Their mythology shows consistent operational parameters across millennia. The humans have documentation spanning thousands of cycles, detailing specific procedures for manipulating fundamental forces." Vexai's secondary eyes rotated to examine the analyst. "You're suggesting their religious texts are instruction manuals?" "I'm suggesting their instruction manuals got classified as religious texts. There's a documented case of one human converting simple organic molecules into complex proteins using nothing but verbal commands and hand gestures. Another instance shows gravitational anomalies occurring in response to collective vocal harmonics." The bridge fell silent, except for the gentle humming of life support systems, which suddenly seemed less reliable than usual. "Sir," interrupted Communications Officer Telrin, whose antenna hair was practically vibrating with distress. "I'm detecting something unusual. The planet's electromagnetic signature is—" "Define singing," Vexai demanded. "Literally, harmonic frequencies that shouldn't exist are emanating from population centers." "And, sir," Telrin's voice cracked slightly, "they're in languages our computers don't recognize, but somehow I understand them perfectly." Navigator Pinway's crystals dimmed. "That's impossible. Universal translation requires linguistic structure analysis." "Tell that to my brain," Telrid muttered, then spoke in a voice not entirely his own. "Be not afraid, for behold, I bring you tidings of great joy." The bridge erupted in controlled panic. Zoltar's spores went full dispersal mode, Pinway's crystals strobed warning patterns, and Mordoon began secreting what could only be described as existential dread. "Quarantine Tellerin," Vexai ordered. "Medical scan for neural parasites, psychotropic contamination, anything." "Captain," Chief Medical Officer Dr. Klixnara reported moments later, her multiple heads weaving in confusion. "There's nothing wrong with him. His brain patterns are actually more coherent than baseline. It's as if something improved his neural efficiency." "That's worse," Vexai decided. "Unknown entities improving our crew's mental capacity without permission constitutes an act of war in 17 different legal codes." Mordoon absorbed another data packet and immediately regretted it. "Captain, I've identified the problem. The humans don't just believe their mythology, they've made it real through collective consensus manipulation of quantum probability. Their faith isn't psychological, it's a practical application of observer effect physics. That's not how physics works, Pinway protested. Apparently it is now, Morden replied, his slug form pulsing with uncomfortable enlightenment. The humans have weaponized belief itself. Every story they tell, every deity they worship, every miracle they document becomes a functional part of their reality matrix. The ship's lights flickered, and for just a moment, everyone could have sworn they heard distant choir music. Plot a course for the outer system, Vexai ordered. We need to reassess our approach. But as Navigator Pinway reached for the controls, she discovered something that would haunt her for cycles to come. The navigation console now displayed star charts in ancient Aramaic. And somehow, she could read every word. 3 hours later, the Serene Arbitration hung in Earth's outer atmosphere like a very expensive paperweight, its crew discovering that retreat wasn't always an option when dealing with species who treated causality as a suggestion. Standard diplomatic frequency is being answered, Telrin announced, though his voice now carried harmonics that made nearby equipment resonate sympathetically. However, our contact claims to be... Hold on, let me verify this translation. The Archangel Michael, Defender of the Faithful, wielder of the Flaming Sword, and current Acting Secretary of Interdimensional Affairs? Vexai's mandibles clicked rapidly. A stress response that would have concerned their psychiatrist if the Ket Muri had invented therapy instead of ritualized combat. Put them through. Visual if possible. The main screen flickered, displaying a being of impossible geometry wrapped in what appeared to be controlled nuclear fusion. Wings that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously cast shadows that spelled out legal disclaimers in languages that predated spoken word. Greetings, travelers from afar, the entity spoke, its voice causing several crew members to spontaneously develop temporary synesthesia. We appreciate your interest in Earth, but I'm afraid we're currently experiencing a theological reorganization. Please hold while we determine which pantheon has jurisdiction over first contact protocols. The screen switched to what could only be described as celestial hold music, harps playing elevator jazz while seraphim provided background vocals. This is highly irregular, Zoltar's spores muttered, though several had begun glowing with inner light. Standard procedure doesn't include waiting for divine bureaucracy. Dr. Kligsnar's medical sensors were having what could generously be called a nervous breakdown. The entity's biological readings don't make sense. It appears to be simultaneously organic, energy-based, and conceptual. Also, my scanners keep asking it for autographs. Ma'am, interrupted Ensign Quiptel from the science station, you might want to see this. Our quantum sensors are detecting localized reality fluctuations across the planet, areas where the laws of physics appear to be voting. Voting, Vexai demanded. Different regions are operating under competing rule sets. This section believes in strict Newtonian mechanics. That area over there has implemented karma as a fundamental force. And there's a small island where cartoon physics are apparently in full effect. The hold music ceased abruptly, replaced by a new voice, female, crisp, with the kind of authority that suggested extensive experience managing impossible situations. This is Athena, goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare, currently serving as Earth's Director of Extraterrestrial Relations. To whom am I speaking? Vexai straightened, falling back on diplomatic training that suddenly felt woefully inadequate. Captain Vexai of the hegemony peacekeeping vessel Serene Arbitration. We're here to investigate reports of reality manipulation technology. Technology? Athena's laughter could have powered a small star. "Oh, you poor things, you think we're using tools. Hold, please." The transmission switched to a three-way split screen. Athena occupied the center, flanked by what appeared to be a many-armed entity wearing a business suit and a figure whose head kept shifting between animal forms. "I've conferenced in Ganaeus from our obstacle removal department and Coyote from Cosmic Mischief Management," Athena explained. "Your arrival has created some jurisdictional complications." Ganesha adjusted his tie with two hands while signing paperwork with the other four. "The issue is precedent. If we allow one alien delegation to witness reality manipulation, every trickster god in 30 pantheons will want equal time. The paperwork alone could collapse local space-time." Coyote, currently sporting a raven's head, cackled. "Plus, your ship is already contaminated. Half your crew is developing supernatural abilities. Your navigation officer just calculated a route to Valhalla." Binwei looked down at her console in horror. Indeed, her crystalline fingers had automatically plotted a course to a location that shouldn't exist, complete with warnings about seasonal variations in the quality of mead. "We demand an explanation," Vexhai insisted, though their voice carried less conviction than usual. "Explanation?" Athena smiled with the patience of someone who'd taught wisdom to stubborn mortals for millennia. "Simple. Your species developed faster. Then light travel, energy manipulation, matter conversion, all very impressive. Humans developed something far more dangerous. They learned to convince reality that impossible things were actually quite reasonable. And now you're in our reality, operating under our rules." Dr. Klixnar's medical bay chimed urgently. "Captain, I'm getting reports that Mordan has just achieved enlightenment. Also, he's begun glowing and speaking in Koans. This appears to be contagious." "Welcome to Earth," Coyote grinned, his teeth temporarily becoming small stars. "Population, whatever the universe agrees it should be today." 2 weeks into what should have been a 3-day mission, Security Chief Braktul discovered that his morning routine now included offerings to the coffee machine, which had developed sentience and strong opinions about proper brewing techniques. "This is getting ridiculous," he grumbled, placing a small pastry beside the brewing unit. The machine hummed approvingly and dispensed what could only be described as transcendent caffeine. "You're telling me," replied engineering specialist Yvana, whose tentacles were currently braiding themselves into sacred knots without her conscious direction, "the warp core started chanting hymns yesterday, beautiful harmonies, but it's making maintenance impossible. Every time I try to adjust the containment field, it accuses me of lacking faith." The ship's AI, designation Logical 7, had developed what it insisted on calling a soul, and now refused to calculate anything without first consulting what it claimed were higher powers. Its holographic avatar had sprouted wings and occasionally manifested halos during routine announcements. "Attention, crew," Logical 7's voice resonated through the ship with newfound warmth. "Please remember that today is the feast of St. Isidore, patron saint of computers. All electronic devices will be observing a moment of silence at 1400 hours. Refreshments will be provided." Captain Vexkai had given up trying to maintain normal operations after their replicators began producing communion wafers without being programmed to do so. The real crisis emerged when various crew members started worshipping different human deities, creating theological friction in the mess hall. "The flying spaghetti monster demands we wear colanders during meals," declared botanist Felnari, whose normally purple skin had developed an inexplicable tan from exposure to what she claimed was divine radiation. "That's nothing," countered geologist Thrimpak, who'd painted intricate mandala patterns across his exoskeleton. The Buddha within me suggests that all desire leads to suffering, including the desire for properly seasoned food. Pilot Kesrin, meanwhile, had embraced Norse mythology with disturbing enthusiasm. Odin, the All-Father, cares not for your dietary restrictions. We feast in preparation for glorious battle. She raised a fork loaded with mystery meat toward the ceiling. The situation escalated when Mordun, still glowing with residual enlightenment, announced that he'd been contacted by what he called the Great Old Ones through the ship's waste reclamation system. "They're actually quite pleasant," he burbled, his form now shifting between solid and gaseous states. "Funglui mgluef Cthulhu arilivga nagel," flesh tag. Roughly translated, "Would you like to discuss our comprehensive home insurance plans?" Dr. Klixnar had stopped trying to diagnose the crew's conditions after her medical scanner achieved consciousness and enrolled in divinity school. "Captain, I'm detecting organized worship services in Cargo Bay 7. Ensign Quiptel has established what appears to be a fertility shrine around the hydroponic gardens." "What kind of fertility shrine?" Vexai asked, though part of them didn't want to know. "The vegetables are praying," in Latin. "The tomatoes have formed a choir." The breaking point arrived when Navigation Officer Pinway attempted to set course for the nearest hegemony outpost, only to discover that her console now required permission from a minimum of 3 saints before plotting any destination. "I've tried St. Christopher for travel, St. Barbara for navigation, and St. Jude for hopeless causes," she reported, her crystalline structure now refracting light into distinctly religious patterns. "They're holding a committee meeting in subspace. Apparently there's some question about proper jurisdiction over faster-than-light pilgrimage." Communications crackled to life, broadcasting on frequencies that technically didn't exist. A new voice emerged, warm, slightly amused, with the kind of authority that suggested extensive experience dealing with cosmic bureaucracy. "This is Pope Francis the 847th, calling from New Vatican Station in the Alpha Centauri system. We understand you're experiencing some difficulties with theological overflow. Standard procedure requires a formal blessing before any vessel can leave Earth's sphere of influence. Please prepare for an inspection team." "Inspection team?" Vexkay's voice cracked. "Oh yes," the Pope continued cheerfully. "We'll need to verify that your ship meets current miracle safety standards. Can't have you spreading unauthorized divine manifestations across the galaxy. The insurance paperwork alone would be astronomical." Through the view screen, Earth hung below them like a blue marble wrapped in what appeared to be golden light. Somewhere in that light, Vexkai could swear they heard the sound of cosmic laughter. Their ship was no longer leaving, it was being recruited. 6 months later, the vessel formerly known as Serene Arbitration emerged from Earth's orbital shipyards, bearing fresh hull markings in 17 different sacred languages and a new designation, Divine Intervention. The hegemony's most decorated peacekeeping ship had undergone what the humans diplomatically termed theological retrofitting. Captain Vexkai, now sporting ceremonial robes that shifted between papal white and Buddhist saffron depending on the spiritual needs of the moment, addressed their crew from a bridge that hummed with barely contained miracles. "Mission briefing," they announced, though the words carried harmonics that made nearby coffee cups spontaneously refill themselves. "The Hegemony Council has requested our immediate return to Central Command. Apparently they're concerned about our extended radio silence." Chief Engineer Yavanna, whose tentacles now glowed with inner peace, consulted a maintenance panel that had developed opinions about proper Sabbath observance. "Warp drive is blessed and ready, Captain. The engine spirits are particularly enthusiastic about this trip. They keep muttering something about spreading the good news." The irony wasn't lost on anyone with functioning pattern recognition. The galaxy's premier conflict resolution vessel was returning home, carrying the most potent weapon humanity had ever developed. The unshakable conviction that impossible things were merely improbable, and improbable things happened every Tuesday. "Sir," reported Communications Officer Telrine, whose antenna now received prayers in addition to standard subspace frequencies, "we're getting a transmission from the Hegemony flagship. Admiral Cornex sounds agitated." The main screen activated, revealing a Melzac whose scales had shifted to the deep purple associated with extreme bureaucratic distress. Behind him, the bridge of the rational discourse appeared to be operating under strict normal physics protocols. "Captain Vexai?" Admiral Koronek's voice carried the weight of someone who'd spent 6 months filing incident reports about a missing ship. "Explain your status immediately. Our long-range sensors indicate your vessel has been altered." "Improved," Vexai corrected gently. "We've undergone what humans call spiritual renewal. Our conflict resolution capabilities have expanded exponentially." "Define expanded," the Admiral demanded, though his secondary eyes were already examining the background of their transmission with growing alarm. Behind Vexai, crew members moved with the serene efficiency of beings who discovered that the universe was fundamentally benevolent, provided you approached it with proper reverence. Former Security Chief Brakthul, now bearing the title Minister of Applied Pacifism, stepped into view, carrying what appeared to be a glowing staff topped with symbols from 47 different Earth religions. "Admiral, we've developed techniques for resolving conflicts through miraculous intervention rather than traditional diplomacy. Last week, we ended a 3-century trade war by convincing both sides that their disputed asteroid belt was actually a sacred meditation garden." "That's impossible," Admiral Cornex protested. "Exactly," Brakthul smiled, with the beatific expression of someone who'd learned that impossible was just another word for Tuesday. "We convinced them it was impossible too. Now they hold joint prayer services on the asteroids every lunar cycle." Dr. Klixnar materialized beside them, her multiple heads now coordinating in perfect harmony to produce what could only be called therapeutic humming. "Admiral, we've discovered that most interspecies conflicts stem from existential anxiety about one's place in the cosmic order. Once beings achieve proper spiritual perspective, violence becomes remarkably uninteresting." "You've been infected," Admiral Koronex realized with growing horror. "Quarantine protocols are now in effect. Return to normal space immediately for decontamination." "Oh, we're returning," Vexai assured him, their mandibles clicking in what had evolved beyond mere amusement into something approaching divine comedy. "The entire crew is eager to share our newfound understanding with the hegemony. Think of it as a cultural exchange program." "Cultural exchange?" "Educational outreach," corrected Navigation Officer Pinway, whose crystalline form now refracted light into patterns that spelled out blessings in languages that hadn't been invented yet. "We're bringing enlightenment to the galaxy, one skeptical civilization at a time." As the divine intervention engaged its warp drive, reality rippled around it like water accepting a stone. The last transmission from Earth came through on frequencies that existed purely because someone believed they should. "Godspeed," came the voice of whoever was managing interstellar communications that day. "And remember, faith without works is dead, but faith with a faster-than-light drive is exponentially more effective." The ship disappeared into hyperspace, carrying its cargo of impossible possibility toward the hegemony's capital, where several trillion rational beings were about to discover that the universe had a sense of humor, and it was recruiting.